and I'm very happy to have on the phone line with me the religious scholar for the United Muslim Masjid. Our dear brother Shaykh Tahir Wyatt is joining us on the line, and I want to greet him by saying Assalamu alaikum, brother Imam Shaykh Tahir. How are you, my brother?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm fine, alhamdulillah.
Good, good. I'm very happy that you're fine. I'm happy that you were able to make it back into the States, and you're here with us today on the show, brother. And I'm excited about that, man.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, I'm happy I got back too, man.
I was thinking about you, because Qasim had told me that you were abroad and you were traveling, and that you know, one of the concerns that I've asked him, I said, yo, I hope and pray he's able to make it back into the country, because, you know, they start saying people that were traveling aboard, they had a certain time limit that they would be able to come back to the States. And then once they came in, depending where they were, they may have to be quarantined. And just to show you how things have changed drastically, myself and Qasim did the show last week, and we went out to go eat dinner afterwards with one another at a public restaurant. Now, today, a week later, you cannot even go out in a public restaurant and sit down and have a meal. So I'm very happy that you're back, you're safe, and please share with us your experiences while you were traveling. And you know,
let me give you some context to show you how much things have changed in the last week. And I'll go a little further back to 10 days. When I left the States last Wednesday, which was March 11th, if you just backpedal a little bit, the NBA had not stopped yet. The NHL, the baseball was still going. You know, nothing had drastically changed yet. I mean, it was getting serious, but nothing had drastically changed. When I landed in Europe on the way to Africa, immediately upon landing, I was, you know, once you can turn your phone back on, I'm getting texts from everywhere. I'm getting all the news headlines that's saying that the United States government is preventing flights from Europe to come to the United States. And it was saying at that point, initially, you know, because the initial announcement that was made was that nobody's coming in, not even American citizens. So, you know, we had about a 4-hour layover, and it was looking like, man, we might have to turn back right now before Friday's deadline. But then it got, you know, it was clarified that this was not for American citizens, and American citizens will be allowed back in. Alhamdulillah, we decided to continue with our journey. Made it to Kenya, and at that point, I mean, I don't think we were there for 24 hours before our return flight got canceled. So, which was through Paris, and so it was like, wait a minute, this thing is getting super real now. And then we got another flight rerouted through England, because England and Ireland were initially exempt from the broader rule of flying in from Europe, and then even England and Ireland met the same fate as the rest of Europe. So we wound up having to actually just, you know, forget that flight, purchase another ticket, and fly back through Dubai. So it was a journey, alhamdulillah. You know, it was interesting to watch how things unfolded in Kenya as well, because Kenya did not have any coronavirus cases for the first day or two that we were there. And then we found out that apparently there was an American woman, younger, I think, under the age of 30, who had tested positive, and then 2 people had come into contact with her, also tested positive. So then they had 3 cases within the borders of Kenya. By Sunday night, texts were going out in Kenya saying all schools were shut down. They started taking drastic measures to curtail the flow of traffic to masajid. I mean, it got real pretty quick there too. And now they have a total ban. It's sort of kind of like how it is in some of the states here, where it is only essential markets are open. No gyms, no restaurants in terms of dining, and they've also given a fatwa to close the masajid. But a brother just texted me earlier today. He said most of the masajids are not they're not abiding by the fatwa. They're bucking the system basically. So anyway, that's the scene. I mean, it's as you know, I mean, we started getting all the information coming in from around the world. So it's it's created somewhat of a hysteria, and I want to just comment on that very quickly. I'm sure you have other stuff you want to ask me, but one of the things that has been said by some of our teachers that I find to be profound is that the fear of corona is more dangerous than corona. And I want to let that sink in for a minute. If we allow the fear that should be for God alone to enter into our hearts, to totally take over our hearts, to create let's call it an irrational approach to life because of the fear of this virus. This is, in fact, more dangerous for us long term than the virus itself. It's at these times when the bets or the calamity, these trials that come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's at that time that we should turn to Him humbly and submissively and call upon Him to remove the harm that has come to us and to relieve the pain that we're facing. It should be a time for humanity as a whole to really reassess some of the things that have led to where we are today, whether those things are material carelessness or whether it is our, spiritual, inconsideration, to really look at, some of the things that we need to be doing better. And if we don't do that, if our hearts are hard at this time, we still don't have any, sense of turning to Allah, of showing empathy for our fellow human beings and to the end of it, then when is that time going to come when we really behave like human beings and not like animals? This is a great test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us as a whole. And it's upon Muslims, to really take a leading role in making corrective measures.
Yes, I agree with you. And speaking of masjids shutting down, in the history of the United Muslim Masjid, which is now 27 years here in the city of Philadelphia, we closed our doors. We closed our doors for the Jummah prayer in both of our facilities, both 15th Street United Muslim Masjid as well as UMIC 1251 Point Breeze Avenue. People were texting, they were calling, what's going on? Why is the masjid shut down? We're the believers. We only fear Allah. Why are we doing this? My advice to people that were contacting me was basically look at what's going on around us. Look at the times that we are in when they are shutting down schools. They're shutting down all types of facilities all across the city. And I mentioned to them that just earlier in the week, you had the religious authorities or council within the city of Philadelphia came together with the mayor and different other management of the city, and they had to make a hard choice to close their doors for their religious services as well. How hard of a decision was that for you, along with the board of directors of the United Muslim Masjid, to shut down for the Jummah prayer service?
Well, it was so hard that it definitely wasn't unanimous. So it wasn't a unanimous decision amongst the board to shut down. And I mean, that just shows you that it was not an easy decision to make. But I'll say this. When you look at the way that the public responds, meaning public in terms of how our government is handling things. When non-essential businesses are being closed, when again, you got schools that have been closed, like schools, universities, all educational institutions are being closed. I mean, the fact of the matter remains is that it's very reasonable to consider, the fact that we have to shut our doors. If in the event that there was a major snowstorm that caused difficulty for people getting to the masjid, or in fact, schools were closed, government was closed, to the end of it, we would consider at that point also closing down the masjid, even though we only fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't fear the ice. We don't fear the snow. But the practicality of the situation may require that we don't hold Jum'ah at that particular time. So as it stands right now, the difference here, I think, for a lot of people is that the United States, alhamdulillah, has not faced the fate of Italy. I think that if we had, we're seeing how the people are dying. I mean, they're getting 475 deaths in one day because of the strain on their medical system. We haven't gotten to that point in the United States. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He remove this affliction from us, from the people as a whole. And I hope that we don't get to that point. But I think for some people it's not real until it happens to somebody in their community. And the reality is Muslims have been afflicted by it. Here in the United States, I have a very good friend who was a physician, in fact, who recently tested positive for coronavirus over 6 or 7 days ago. He's still asymptomatic. So it just so happens, because he's a physician and because of the position that he's in, that he did test, right? But the reality is that he's a carrier of the virus and he shows no symptoms. And that's the reality for many people who have been infected. They've been infected by people who do not show the symptoms of the virus. And I guess that's part of what makes this a little bit tricky to deal with, right? Because you're not dealing with people who are open, not necessarily. You're not necessarily dealing with people who are showing symptoms, yet they could still spread the virus. And here's the other thing. For a lot of people, what concerns them is that, well, this virus is not necessarily deadly, meaning that the majority of the people who get this virus are not going to die from the virus. They're not even going to be hospitalized, which is true. However, the problem with that logic is that we don't have the medical facilities on a global level, to deal with the number of people who would need to be hospitalized if we don't slow down the spread of this thing and, spread it out over time. And I think that's where the danger comes in. So we have to be precautious. And part of that precaution, and that's what you're seeing in much of the Muslim world, throughout the Middle East and other parts of the Muslim world, North Africa, where they've decided that to shut things down because the best way to control an epidemic is to not mix with people. And so we had a plague that happened at the time of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. It was called Ta'un Amwas. And basically, that was the one. It's kind of famous hadith where Omar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was heading north from Medina towards the Sham, Syria, Palestine area. And he heard about the plague that had come to the people there of Sham. And so he returned back to Medina. Long story short, the governor of Sham at that time, who was Amr ibn al-As, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, may Allah, peace and blessing, or may Allah be pleased with him, what he said to the people, the advice that he gave to the people at that time was, "And tafarraqu fil jibal," which means basically to split up and go out to the mountains. In other words, split up from each other be distant from each other, this is the way that is going to keep the plague. I mean, this was their own, method of isolation, if you will, for those who were ill, and then quarantining those who were not ill. That was their own method of dealing with it, and it's still the best way to deal with these type of situations when we're dealing with highly contagious diseases. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Allah definitely knows best. Let me just say this, and then I'll let you, pose whatever question you have. We have in the hadith of the Prophet in both Bukhari and Muslim, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, there is no adwa, which means there is no contagion, there is no infectious disease that spreads by itself, which is an important concept to understand. Meaning that these diseases are agents and they don't act independently. You could have 3 people in a room. One of them is known to have a disease. He sneezes, and on both people at the same time, one of them gets sick and the other one doesn't. Right? And that's the decree of God, that one of them would get sick and the other one doesn't. So as Muslims, we don't believe that these diseases act independently of the will of God, that they're not outside of the will of God. In that same hadith at the end, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, وَفِرَّ مِنَ الْمَجْدُومِ كَمَا تَفِرُّ مِنَ الْأَسَدِ, and run away from the leper, and the one who has leprosy, which is a contagious disease, as you know, the way that you would run away from a lion. So here we have 2 things in play. The Prophet is instructing us how to approach this theologically in terms of how we believe in something. We believe that these things will not affect us except by the will of God. At the same time, we take precautions and we run away from it the way that we would run away from a lion. Now, again, what makes this a little bit different is that we don't exactly know who has it or not, right? And unless we know that this person has been quarantined, they haven't come into contact with anybody else for the last, let's say 14 days, 7 to 14 days, you can pretty much be sure that this person is not even a carrier. But the reality is we have to take precautions, but not be oversensitive, not be, maybe not oversensitive is not the word. We need to be precautious, but we don't need to be scared of everybody.
Right. Sheikh, this is what I want to do, because we got 3 callers that's been waiting very patiently, and I don't want to lose any of them. We're going to go to the phone line. We have Bilal from Alni waiting. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the show, brother.
Wa alaikum assalam, Jihad, and brother Sheikh. Glad you made it back to the States. I would like to make a comment for you to consider at the next decision-making as far as Jumu'ah is concerned. I heard everything you just said, and I agree with it all. However, when you go to the supermarket and you go to Walmart or one of those big stores that's selling groceries that we need as essential, there's 500-600 people in there packed to pack. Okay, so they're not really listening to their own wolves. Okay, so in my opinion, that if they could open up the Walmarts and supermarket and pack all those people in at one time, then, technically we could have Jumu'ah for 20 minutes and get out of there.
Okay. Thank you, Brother Bilal. Let's give Shaykh Tahir an opportunity to try to answer that question.
So, just so that we're clear, I'm not against having Jumu'ah. However, I think that it has to be done responsibly. I do not think that packing 300, 400 people in UMM Masjid is responsible. That's number one. Number two, we have been restricted by the law not to gather with more than 50 people. So you can have Jumu'ah with every madhab that exists. You can have Jumu'ah with 40 people. And I think that is a possibility. However, it would have to be done responsibly, and we need to take our own precautions as it relates to what's going on in other institutions. to be honest with you, we don't have any control over that. Number one, and two wrongs don't make it right. So if it's wrong what they're doing, it doesn't mean that we should go do what they're doing just because they're doing it. The other thing is that what I've seen at the supermarkets, at the these superstores, your Walmarts or your Targets or things like that, I'm not seeing the same picture that the brother just mentioned. I'm not denying that what he's saying is true. It could be very different at different places, but I'm not seeing that. What I'm seeing is, a few people here and there, and not that there's not a lot of people, but we're talking about huge stores as opposed to a very small, confined message. So we're talking about these huge stores where even if you had 200 people in it, it really wouldn't feel like it. And we're not coming into that close contact with those people that are there. They're maintaining that, social distancing and so forth. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But again, I'm not totally, against people congregating, to be honest with you. It just has to be done responsibly.
Well, Sheikh, what the city has done now, the city has reduced the number to no more than 10 people at a gathering now. This is according to the city. The city now.
Right.
What we want to do, we want to go back to the phone line. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Jihad, let me just say, there's a difference, and I haven't looked at the city's website today, but there is a difference. I just want us to be clear on that, between what they're recommending and what they're prohibiting.
Right.
So from what I understand, they're prohibiting more than 50, even in New Jersey, where it's a little stricter than it is in Pennsylvania.
A whole lot stricter.
They're prohibiting more than 50. In fact, the governor said that even if it's a private gathering and you have more than 50 people, we will shut you down. So the 10, I think, is more like what they're recommending.
Okay.
Whereas the 50 seems to be what they're prohibiting. Allah knows best.
We're going to go back to the phone line. We have Brother Prince from Schuylkill. Assalamu alaikum, brother. Welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum assalam. One thing I know is that Islamic men and women are some of the cleanest people. They practice Islam truly. They're some of the cleanest people on this earth, from the days in their bathroom to washing daily. So, we're just almost like a casualty of war. But I'm opening up a second franchise right down the street from Sister Claire Muhammad. If you guys didn't see it, it's called Chickaboom, 4626 Lancaster Avenue, with plans to probably open up another 2 more. So I know you guys have been wanting to sit with you guys economically and probably talk with you guys. So I'd be more than willing, and I'll also leave my number because I also own a landscaping company, snow removal company, construction company, moving company. So, and all of these were built and designed to take federal contracts, so that governmental contracts that's tied into these companies. And so whatever I can do to enhance the revenue in the UMM and support and show you guys how to do it and support, I'm going to leave my number, and we can hook up as soon as possible.
Thank you, Brother Prince. Appreciate that, brother.
Not a problem.
Economics is very important today. We're going to go to Jacob, who's in Alney. Assalamu alaikum, brother. Labbaik, Jake.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. And to you, brother Imam, hey, look, I know we thank Allah, and I know you thank Allah for being home, right? There's nothing like home. But, brother Imam, look, I pray that Allah give us what we should learn from this virus. This virus sees the mankind as one, right? Because it don't discriminate. It don't care whether you are believing Muslim, an atheist, a gay, a lesbian, a Chinese, or whatever, right? This virus can see that because it works with that knowledge, right? Is it that a virus can be smarter than the human? What is about that? What can you tell me that would cool me out, that I could see that I'm living in a time where a virus that got smarter than the human? But thank you, brother Imam. I'm going to hang up and listen to what you say. If anything, I don't know. I can't figure it out myself. That's why I'm going to ask you. But assalamu alaikum.
Wake salam.
How do you respond?
let me ask you this before you respond to that, because I got some really important questions we definitely want to try to get out the way. Let's talk about.
But I'm going to forget.
I don't want you to forget. Go ahead.
In brief, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah the mighty and majestic, says in the Quran, أَفَنَجْعَلُ muslimina kal mujrimin ma lakum kayfa tahkumun. Allah says, will we judge the Muslims the way that we do the wrongdoers? What is wrong with you? How do you judge? Allah, throughout the Quran, has made many distinctions between people. For us to come and make everybody one that is in the sight of God and the way that we are responding to His call, that would be unjust, in fact. So I'm not sure that I follow what the big Jake was saying here in terms of, there being no distinctions. There are plenty of distinctions between human beings. This virus doesn't distinguish. It doesn't discriminate in that sense. And of course, when it comes to people's rights, when it comes to upholding and maintaining their dignity as human beings, then as Muslims we should be maintaining the dignity of all human beings. But to not make distinctions is not from Islam.
Okay, I got you. I hope that our brother Jake was able to understand your answer.
Oh, he understood. the big Jake is a very intelligent brother.
I want to talk about the thought, and you can help me understand this. Can we do a remote Juma prayer? Is that possible? I know that in the situation, the masjid was open, but the Dhuhr prayer was observed. Can you do a remote prayer? Is that something that we can stream so people can see that? Is that a possibility?
Well, not exactly, but what is a possibility, and perhaps we should do this moving forward. What we could do is, have 10 brothers, for example, come together in the masjid.
Mm-hmm.
One of them would give the khutbah, for example, Imam Hanif would give the khutbah. And that could be streamed so that people would still benefit from a khutbah every week. But in terms of the salat itself, at that point, the live stream would need to stop, and those people who are watching, whether in their homes or their offices or wherever they may be, they would need to pray Dhuhr.
Okay.
And they could not follow the imam praying Jumu'ah.
Okay. That's how I've always wondered about that. Now, I want to ask you, although we may have suspended temporarily the congregational Jumu'ah prayer, what about the fact that you still have an alarming number of people, men and women, coming to the masjid to make the 5 daily prayers? Maybe not so much the Fajr prayer, but the Dhuhr, the Asr, the Maghrib, the Isha prayer. You still have a big number of people coming in the masjid. Let's talk about what procedures that United Muslim Masjid is making as far as the cleanliness of the masjid. Is there a protocol that after every prayer, the doorknobs is going to be wiped down, the bathroom is going to be sanitized? How about that?
Well, let me just say, I am quarantined. So,
you got a self-quarantine going on, huh?
I really do. As per government regulations. I mean, it's mandated by the government. And, we received the instructions coming into JFK. And also my personal position kind of reemphasized that point. So there was from a leadership standpoint, we have discussed taking certain measures. To be honest with you, I cannot say that someone is enforcing them because I'm not there and I have not been able to check to make sure. However, what I will say is this. We have changed, or at least in terms of policy, we have changed the opening and closing times for the masjid. So the masjid is open 5 minutes before the adhan. It closes 10 minutes following the main congregation with no exception. And that gives us a chance to disinfect the masjid. Everybody has to bring their own prayer rug. If not, the other alternative that we have is putting down the brown bathroom paper towels over top of the carpet so that they can be removed immediately, and we're not worried about the virus being in the carpet.
Okay.
The other part, and I really hope this is being abided by, but I'm really not sure. My suggestion was to totally shut down the restroom and the wudu station. And the reason for that is that viruses spread more in moist environment, wet surfaces. So, and you really can't control the disinfecting part of that. So let's just say, for example, a person does have the virus, goes in, turns on the sink or at the wudu area, right? Another person comes in right behind them, has no idea. That person doesn't know they're infected. They have no idea. They come in and they also turn on the sink. It's more likely to spread through those wet surfaces than any other way.
Yeah.
Even airborne.
Yes. Yes.
So, my opinion was to totally shut down the restrooms. That was met with a little bit of resistance, but because the reality is that people need to make wudu to pray. And my thing was, that's not the masjid's problem. These are dire circumstances.
Yeah, you're right.
We have to take extreme measures. It is what it is. And if they need to make wudu, they get a bottle. They can go outside and make wudu. I mean, the other thing is, as you know, many of our patrons, constituents, are not African American. They come from backgrounds where they don't believe that it's permissible to wipe over their socks for wudu, which is a whole nother issue, right? So what's happening is that every time they come in the masjid, they're taking off their socks and they're washing their feet, and they're not putting their socks back on because what? Because their feet are wet, right? You know how their feet get dry? They walk on the carpet.
Ooh.
Right. And so we're dealing with a situation now. No, really. I mean, let's just think about this thing practically.
Right.
We're dealing with a situation now. I mean, this has been a problem at most masjids forever. It's not something new. The area where you first come in, that area has to be shampooed a lot more often than other areas. And so what's happening is now, I mean, to me, that's a hazard. And we have to be very careful about that. But in general, I don't think that leaving the masjid open for the regular prayers is anywhere near like leaving it open for Salat al-Jum'ah.
Okay.
But again, as I mentioned before, on a personal note, I'm not against keeping it open even for Salat al-Jum'ah if it's done responsibly.
I got you. Now, let's just look at it like this. We are about 1 month away from Ramadan.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really seem, and Allah knows best, that things are clearing up within the next 2 weeks like they have predicted. Your thoughts on the nightly prayers? Your thoughts on the iftar dinners at night? And I'm going to go even further. Your thoughts on a Eid prayer festivity. I know I'm stretching far out there, but it's a reality because we are 1 month away from Ramadan.
Well, let me say this. This situation to me has a very clear silver lining. It has shown me the scholarship that we have within our American Muslim community. I'm interacting with imams, academics and so forth around the United States. And I feel very confident that we'll come up with a solution for both the iftars, for the tarawih, and for Eid, if in fact this thing stretches that long where we're not able to even congregate for the Eid. I believe that we'll come up with solutions that will help reinforce the spirituality of the Muslims. It may be a blessing in disguise not to have, the huge public iftars every night. And it's not to say that those are bad things at all. But the reality is that Alhamdulillah, our deen is very adaptive. And we'll find a way to get through this by Allah's leave. I'm very confident in that. Well, alhamdulillah. And people right now, people literally, as we speak, are working on ways to make it work in Ramadan if we're not able to congregate.
Okay. We're going to go back to the phone line. We have our last caller for the day, Brother Nafis. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the show, brother. He's gone? Oh, Nafis, call back. 215-634-8065. 215-634-8065. If you're just tuning in, this is Islam Today. We're talking to Shaykh Tahir Wyatt. He is the residential scholar, in-house scholar for the United Muslim Masjid. And he is giving us some tips, some advice. He shared with us his trip that he was abroad and different things that he was blessed to see while he was away. He's now self-quarantined. He's not in the masjid. We don't want people to think that he's in the masjid and he's leading the prayers and teaching classes and things. No, he's self-quarantined by the advice of the government of the United States and the advice of his personal physician. Sheikh, let me ask you this. When you were traveling abroad, what were some of the things that you seen? Did you see the masjids being open? Did you see the masjids being closed down, or was it towards the end of your departure of your trip that you witnessed some of these things?
Yeah, so that was towards the end of the trip. The masjids were still open, but let me tell you this: the markets dried up. It was unbelievable to see, how the markets were abandoned. Alhamdulillah, when I was on the way out, I was in Nairobi, and a brother said to me, he said, listen, we have people here. They have to go out and do what they do on a daily basis, or they won't eat. These are people who live literally day to day. And he was saying, I just want us to ponder this, man. He said they will die of starvation tomorrow before they die of corona next week. They're not worried about corona, in other words. They've got to go out there, and they can't afford social isolation and all that. They have to actually go out. And it's interesting because, if the virus hits them hard, it's going to spread there very quickly because they don't have the they really don't have the capacity to isolate. I mean, it's not, they won't survive the isolation. And that's deep, man, when you really think about it. But I think that one of the things that we have to keep in mind, because there are a lot of people who are fear-mongering, and I don't want that to be the tone that's struck. Again, I think what we have to do is have responsible hope. When I say responsible hope, I'm saying responsible in the fact that we take precautions, that we take precautionary measures, but hope in realizing that we are going to get through this by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's aid, and grace and mercy.
Yes.
Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us that He's going to test us. And He don't think that you read these ayats in the Quran and that they just apply to somebody else. Doesn't apply to me. No, we're going to test you. بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ, with some degree of fear, with some degree of hunger, with loss of wealth, with loss of property, with loss of life. وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. But give the glad tidings to those who have sabr. It is during these times that we have to have sabr, which is often translated as patience, which may be more accurately rendered as endurance. Having the fortitude, to get through these situations, to endure those difficulties beautifully, without complaining. We're not going to complain about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decree. We're going to have good thoughts about Allah. Husnul Dhann. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, لَا يَمُوتَنَّ أَحَدُكُمْ إِلَّا وَهُوَ يُحْسِنُ الظَّنَّ بِرَبِّهِ. Let not one of you die except that he has good thoughts about his Lord. Right? So since we don't know when we're going to die, this is actually a command for us to live in a state where we have good thoughts about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in bi'idhnillah, again, our approach to this has to be, principled optimism and responsible hope.
Sheikh, let's go back to the phone line. We have Nafis that is with us. Last call of the day. Nafis, salaam alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What's going on, brothers?
MashaAllah.
Not much, brother.
I'll call you after the show. I need to talk to you. MashaAllah.
Inshallah. How have you been?
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. I hope you're doing well.
Allah Akbar. Sheikh, I wanted to ask you in regard, in the light of some of the decisions that have been made, could you expound upon the concept or the idea of maqasid al-sharia and those five things, or if not those five things, regarding life and the protection of life that the sharia takes in consideration in our deen?
Yeah, stay on the line, inshallah. So as we know, our sharia, and in fact, every legislation of every prophet has come to protect five main interests. The first is the protection of the deen. Second is the protection of life, preservation of life. Then comes the preservation of the mind, that is, preservation of mental health, and sanity, and mental well-being. Fourth is the preservation of wealth, and fifth is the preservation of honor or one's progeny, and that can be perhaps interchanged numbers 4 and 5. The point is that the preservation of life is very important. The emphasis that Islam puts on the sanctity of life is second to none. I mean, you won't find another sharia with the text that we have that look at or that talk about the importance of the preservation of life. And so the decisions that have been made across the board have been made with that particular maqsad or that particular objective in mind, and that is that we are to do our best to save lives. At the same time, preservation of faith is very important, and so what you'll see is that some people look at keeping the masajid open as a way of preserving faith. In my opinion, that may be a little bit over. I'm not gonna say it's reaching, but I think that we can preserve faith down the line without the masjid, with the masjid being temporarily closed. I think it's still possible to preserve faith, and we have instances historically where a person has been made to say something that would denounce faith so that they could save their lives. So anyway, these are all things that have to be taken into consideration.
MashaAllah.
Nafis, how's your family? How's your mom?
She's about the same.
Okay.
About the same. It doesn't get better.
Right.
As it goes on, it gets deeper. It's just deep, but alhamdulillah, everything's okay. But how have you been, Sheriff?
I've been good, man. I've been good. I'm only holding this spot down on the second Saturday of the month for you to return and come back because, you two blend.
This is the third Saturday.
Well, this is my regular Saturday. I'm normally here. You guys normally have the second Saturday. You have such a scholarly show,
Go ahead.
For those who don't know, this is Nafis Bowie. He's been around for, when I tell you forever, he's been around forever. He's a great brother. The former show that used to be on this station, on Word Radio, this is Living Islam. He was one of the original pioneers, one of the original producers, one of the original hosts of the show, for those who do not know. And listening to Nafis, for real, I say this wholeheartedly, and I mean this with all my heart. It's like listening to a scholar amongst us. So if you take Shaykh Tahir and you take Shaykh Nafis, Boy, I tell you, get your pen and piece of paper out. See, my show is like the layman show, the grassroots people. We laugh, we joke a little bit. You guys come with some serious, heavy stuff.
Are you in the studio right now? Yeah.
I'm here.
Oh,
yeah.
Mashallah.
I'm essential personnel. I have to be out.
Is your family okay?
My family, they drive me crazy. You know.
How about you, Shaykh? I heard you say you were in quarantine.
That is correct.
Okay, so everything's okay though.
Yes, alhamdulillah,
okay.
Everything is fine. Well, alhamdulillah.
Now, Shaykh Tahir, most people might be sitting in the house reading, watching Netflix or whatever they may be doing. Yourself, you're a scholar. You are a scholar in the faith. You're also quarantined in the house for the next 2 weeks. What do you do?
So let me just three things. Number one, just for the record, there's a difference between isolation and quarantine.
Okay.
Isolation is for people who are sick. They have to be put into isolation in order to avoid, affecting other people. They're sick with, contagious disease, infectious disease. Quarantine is for people who don't show any symptoms, but they may have been exposed to people with symptoms, and so they're quarantined, but otherwise they're well, alhamdulillah. So let me just make that clear. I'm well. I'm quarantined just because of the fact that, there's possible exposure, in terms of travel. Thirdly, just a matter of correction, I'm not a scholar. I'm on a path of trying to be a scholar one day. Hopefully, I'll get to that point one day in my life. But what I do, to be honest with you these days, is very similar to what I would do any other day. Read and write. That's it. But I wish we got a chance to talk about, now I hear this the ending coming on. I wish we got a chance to talk about what people could do during this time. Let me just say briefly, take advantage of your free time. The Prophet ﷺ said there are two blessings which many of us are cheated out of: health and free time. Brother Nafis that's on the phone with us right now just went through a major health scare. He can tell you about the blessing of health, because when you lose a blessing, that is when you start to realize how much of a blessing it really is. And this issue of free time is important. It's important that the Muslims take advantage of it. If you're in the house and you're not going out, call the adhan in your house. Pray together. Use this time to come together as a family in the worship of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has encouraged us in the Quran. He says, فَلَوْلَا جَاءَهُمْ بَأْسُنَا تَضَرَّعُوا فَلَوْلَا أَنْ جَاءَهُمْ بَأْسُنَا تَضَرَّعُوا. He said, if it hadn't been, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, when our calamity befalls them, that they should tadarra'u, that they should humble themselves. This is a time to turn what? To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in dua. If we don't turn to Allah in dua right now and ask Him to protect us and to lift this affliction from us, when do we turn to Allah? When does that happen? These are times that we should be turning to Allah. We use the time to pray together as a family. Perhaps just read something from Tafsir every day, even if it's 10, 15, 20 minutes. But don't let a day go by without taking advantage of it and of this free time that we have in this family time.
MashaAllah. That's great advice, brother. That is great advice. We want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Shaykh Tahir, we thank you, and hopefully, God willing, we will see you real soon. Brother Nafis,
hey,
closing comments from you, brother.
Hey, I just wanted to tell you that maybe, inshallah, I'll probably be able to come back. I guess we can start next month or the month after. It all depends on how this thing works out. You know what I mean?
Sounds good, man.
I pretty much got my situated with my mother, who's going to watch her. And my situation is that of, I just have a little bit of sensational deficiency in my left side, but mashallah, I'm good.
Okay. We look forward to having you back here at this mic, brother.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, man.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you, brothers, so very much. This is Islam Today, a presentation of the United Muslim Broadcast. I'm your host, Brother Jihad Ahmed, and I'd like to encourage you to stay safe out there. Be very careful. Keep washing your hands. That's the thing that I can tell you. Wash your hands, and wash your hands.